Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another video of me learning animation by attempting to remaster scenes from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So far through this journey, I've made my way through select scenes of the first 2 episodes, and I actually wasn't planning on doing another entry in remastering Avatar, at least for this specific video. I was planning on working on other projects I had in mind, but I ended up getting myself a drawing tablet. Well, cause why not? And I wanted to mess around with it. I ended up getting a free trial of Clip Studio Paint, not sponsored, and started messing around with some of the animation features. What better way to test everything out than by trying to remaster a random scene? So I ended up losing track of time, and before I knew it, I was working on another addition to this series. For those of you who've seen my previous videos, you would know that I worked on this animation project on my iPad Air using Procreate Dreams. But due to the paltry 64GB storage, which is way too small in this day and age, I decided to get a dedicated drawing tablet where I can connect to either my PC or my MacBook and just simply draw. I also went out and got Jazza's ultimate digital brush set from the YouTube channel Draw with Jazza. And I do plan on using Clip Studio Paint for future projects, whether they're animation based or not, so please subscribe to see more. If you also end up enjoying this video, please leave a like as well, as that'll be very helpful to me. For this video, I wanted to take some scenes of our titular character entering his ultimate form, the Avatar state. I'll be using shots from the second episode of the show titled The Avatar Returns. As always, I recorded the process and I really hope you enjoy. Let's move on to the first scene I chose, which is Aang underwater after his attempted escape from Zuko's ship. As you can see, the background is pretty dark and there's not much movement happening in this scene, so this process ended up taking no time at all. I just had to focus on getting the rest of Aang's arm and hands in the frame, and because of the underwater setting, the lines don't have to be consistent due to the refraction from the water. It's a really good thing I chose a simple scene because I was not used to Clip Studio Paint at all, especially coming from Procreate Dreams, which in my opinion is a lot more intuitive, maybe because I learned that one first. And also because I'm not that great at animation still, but Clip Studio Paint definitely had a bit of a learning curve. But after spending some time with it for this scene, I learned quite a bit and I am definitely getting more comfortable with it overall. The next scene is a pretty close shot of Aang's face as he enters the Avatar state. I filled in the rest of his head and neck and followed pretty much the same process as the prior scene. The only change is due to the glow from the Avatar state. So I promptly made sure to match the colors with the surrounding pieces. And now that Aang's awake and most likely can't breathe, he needs to find a way back up to the surface, which is exactly what he does by using the water around him to propel himself back up. I started with the background and I tried to make it look as smudgy as possible. I then proceeded to work on the underwater water? What in the SpongeBob? But I found this piece of the scene to be quite fun. There wasn't too much to animate on the side, so I worked on these little streams and it was a very relaxing task. And although it's not the main focus of the scene, it really adds to the overall experience of it all. The next scene I chose has Aang emerging out of the water in an epic fashion. Of course, this wouldn't be a remastering Avatar video if I didn't work on some icebergs, so that's precisely what I did. I wasn't familiar with the brushes, so it took some more time than I was used to. But after getting the background completed, I had to shift my attention to the water. This includes adding some of the reflections of the icebergs and these little dark ripples coming from the ship. Not to mention Aang's exit from the sea is pretty violent, so I wanted to make sure that I can make this watery explosion look like it belongs in the scene. Now, I may be a little bit biased, but I think I did a fairly good job. I did take a little break in between, me being human and all, but when I came back, I wasn't the biggest fan of how I drew the iceberg on the right, so I decided to redo it. And once I was satisfied, I continued forward. When I first saw this shot of Aang moving upwards, I got a bit unsure if I had the ability to emulate these lines seamlessly. But once I gave it a try, I realized that the process was actually super simple. All I had to do was add random lines and then blur them afterwards. As you can see, it was not difficult at all, but it ended up being kind of tedious. Luckily, I was able to break up that monotony by adding in bits of the water here and there. Like the prior scene, this isn't the main focus, but I think it does a really good job completing the look. Jumping over to the next frame, I moved everything over to the left so I can put the attention on Aang and Zuko's ship. But I did realize that once I did that, I didn't know what to do for this ship portion since there was so much blank space. Luckily, I own this book called The Art of the Animated Series for Avatar The Last Airbender, and in one of the pages, thankfully, there was an image of what the ship should look like. First, I drew a very rough sketch, as you can see here, using the reference image from the book, and I also changed transparency of the layer so I can use this as an outline going forward. Thanks to not using Procreate Dreams, and no, I'm not bashing this application, I actually like it a lot, but I'm finally able to use straight lines without jumping to another program. Never thought I'd see the day. I didn't really use perspective lines for this scene, but I did try my best to emulate what I thought they would look like. After getting the proportions down, I wanted to add in some of the coloring, and this ended up taking quite a while, as you can see here. I ended up just filling out the remaining parts of the ship using colors that I thought would fit with the overall look, and I also realized that I did the scene backwards from what I normally like to do, since I usually like working on the backgrounds first. So I promptly made sure to get the icebergs in the water done as soon as possible. After looking at the overall picture, I realized that the colors didn't really match the ship, so I figured I may as well just darken everything till I couldn't really make out much difference, and thankfully it did work. But unfortunately I wasn't able to figure out how to use keyframes at this point in time, so I ended up just having to duplicate the current frame, move it over a couple places and rinse and repeat, and it took so long. But luckily I was able to figure out keyframes later in this video. After that painstakingly tedious process, I moved over to Aang and I did what Dr. Connor strived his whole life to do, and I gave Aang his hands back. I also worked on part of the water, and although the ship was quite annoying to both draw and to move around, I ended up enjoying working on this scene overall. I think I kept you waiting long enough, so let's take a quick preview of how this collection of scenes look together. And now let's move our attention to the star of my previous video, and that's the banished Prince Zuko. I once again used the revolutionary straight line tool and tried to map where the panels would be. I also messed with the different types of brushes and tried to match the original animation to my own. I'm also very thankful this was a still background because I definitely felt like I needed a break after that previous scene. Overall, this went very smoothly and took me literally like no time at all. I mean, look just how fast I'm going through this. Haters will say it's sped up. Moving our focus to behind Zuko, and I can safely say that I'll be retiring using my deck of cards as a ruler after this. Finishing the ship was super simple along with finishing these icebergs. I don't know why I have difficulties with icebergs in some frames and then in others it's very easy, but I'm just thankful this was one of the easy ones. I was definitely getting more comfortable using Clip Studio paints with this brush set. Unfortunately, I wasn't that comfortable with it overall because I still didn't know how to do keyframes, so I ended up just having to duplicate frames all over again, like a total noob. And speaking of noob, I completely forgot to click record just like in my previous video. Thankfully, I realized my mistake in the middle of my drawing session and not at the end, so I'll briefly explain my process. I was having trouble with this iceberg for some reason, so I decided to just copy and paste it to save time, and I just ended up drawing on top of it to make it look a little bit different. Initially, I thought the waterbending would be so much fun to animate, but I guess I just never learned my lesson because this scene was super tedious and just plain boring. The water being different shades also made this tougher than anticipated, but ultimately I was getting quite happy with the end results. Let's zoom away from this close-up shot to a wide shot of Aang serving his enemies this water tornado. Trying to get the ship's texture to match took me absolute ages, and even then I still don't think I got it quite right. There's something about it that just seems very off, and if anyone has any specific tips, please let me know in the comments down below. Unlike the previous attempt at drawing waterbending, this water tornado was tons of fun. Part of the reason might be because I think it just looks awesome. I worked on the shadows next and added some finishing touches on the floor and the sides of the ship before I ultimately marked this as complete. And just when I thought I was finally done with drawing water, this next shot straight up taunted me to my face.
I can't. Not again. I'm not just strong enough.
This scene was brutal because it encompassed every single challenge I had into one scene. We have the water, which takes up so much space and also changes in each frame. I also had to work on the ship with the weird textured metals, and I had to work on this iceberg in the background as it floats annoyingly across the screen. Thankfully at this time I finally figured out how keyframes worked in Clip Studio, so it actually wasn't too bad. But that's not all. I also had to fill out the bodies of the soldiers as they accompany Zuko overboard. After all that trouble, I thought it actually came out pretty good. The same couldn't be said for Zuko's situation as we see him falling off the side of the ship into the cold water right below. I'm so thankful for this blurry background because it made my job a lot easier. I used the blur filter for the first time and I was able to achieve a similar effect. I also read the comments from my previous video about how this boomerang effect was intentional and that it was called a smear frame, which is a frame that's used to simulate motion blur. I noticed that there was a slight smear frame happening just on the edge of the frame here, so I added it to the overall scene, and thank you so much for letting me know in the comments in the previous video. Before I was able to work on the next scene, I noticed something a bit off. The ship looks a bit different from the reference image I showed earlier. This cylindrical funnel seems to be a lot closer than what I ended up drawing, so I decided to go back to the previous frame and fix up this mistake. I'm so thankful I figured out how keyframes worked because this would have been a disaster having to do all that duplicating all over again. Going back to the original scene, I moved everything over to the left again and drew in the rest of the ship. Since this object was a bit further away, I didn't have to focus too much on the intricate details of it all, so it ended up being a lot easier than expected. I also worked on completing the water and the icebergs before focusing on keyframing everything together. And finally, moving on to our final scene for this video. Aang's feeling pretty much how I feel at the end of one of these videos, honestly. Luckily, this final scene is pretty easy. I didn't want to redraw Appa, so I just kind of copy and pasted this image and tried to keyframe him across the sky. I had a lot of trouble trying to get Appa to look smooth, and no matter what I did, the image came out all over the place. After much trial and error, I decided to stop being so particular about everything, and I decided that I was just done. Here is the final culmination of all the remastered scenes in this video. I think despite the struggles of learning a new software, trying out a new device, and using different brushes, I'm very pleased with how all of this turned out. Once I get more comfortable with Clip Studio Paint, I think I can do an even better job for future videos. It's been a blast making these videos and I can't wait to see what else I have in store for you all, whether it be for stuff like this or other art challenges I'll make for myself to better my craft, or just talking about movies or shows that I've seen. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, like if you enjoyed this video, and please leave a comment down below what you thought. But anyways, I appreciate each and every one of you, and I really hope you enjoyed this video since I worked hard on it. Thanks for watching till the end for those of you that stuck around. Have a great rest of your day. Till next time, bye.